Okay, since I forgot to turn the recording on when Bonnie started reading, let me just reference that. That was Matthew 9 through 13. And Trent's got a microphone, and Taylor's got a microphone. Taylor, if you don't mind standing over on that side. If you guys have a question or comment, please do not hesitate to raise your hand, but please wait until you get the microphone, because that's what enables us to get this recorded well. Okay. I cannot speak French. I've listened to multiple YouTube videos on how to pronounce this, and I immediately forget it after I listen to it. Do I have any French speakers among us?
Bonnie is good.
Bonnie, are you good? See, I'm not putting you on the spot because I put your mom on the spot last time, and she was like, I have no idea.
I think it would be pronounced.
That's exactly how it sounds on YouTube. That was very good. And what it means in English, this is a famous painting, except it's not a famous painting because I made this in Canva because there's copyright laws, okay? But this is a famous painting by a French artist, and it says, "This is not a pipe." Raise your hand. Taylor, come get Steve. Raise your hand if you're going to make a comment. I'm pausing for comments.
It's an image of a pipe.
It's an image of a pipe. Yes? But you get what the artist is trying to do here, yes? The artist is trying to throw us. I watched a YouTube video last week. I'm weird, y'all. I mean, things pop up in my algorithm that are strange. There was a caption to a title for this video that said, "Why is there a fly on this painting?" So I had to watch this video of this assistant curator of the National Archives explain why this beautiful lady from 1600s Germany has this beautiful headdress on, and there's a fly on the headdress. Why in the world would an artist do that? And the reason I had to watch the video is because when I was in high school art class and I drew a still life that our teacher was teaching us to do pen and ink, and I drew a still life of a hat and a cane and all this stuff, and I kept dripping ink on the painting. So there would be a big blob of ink, and I turned them all into flies. Because you can't erase it, right? Now, the point of the painting, I have no idea, and I love it. I love watching videos where the expert says, "We have no idea. Why is this fly on the painting? We have no idea, but here's what we think." And then they tell you what they think. And what they think, basically, bottom line is, the artist is trying to say to you, he's trying to get you to walk up and want to shoo the fly away from the painting. And it's a trick that the artist was doing to pull you into the painting, because it's a hyper-realistic painting, right? I mean, he's got every eyelash on the lady. I mean, the fur on her sleeves looks like you could rub it, you know. And so he's put this hyper-realistic fly on there to make you want to shoo the fly away from the painting. And, okay, maybe that's what he did. I don't know.
That's incredible. I find it very interesting.
Okay, I'll send you a link to the video. It's a very interesting video. See, you and I are strange together. Why in the world am I saying this? Because this is not a church. So I got introduced to the concepts I'm going to introduce you today again through some YouTube videos. I had heard a preacher on a podcast. I wanted to hear what his church services were like. I tuned in just in time for him to start a series of sermons that I'm going to share with you today, the information from that series of sermons. And he got it out of a book. So I bought the book, I read the books, the source material. And that book begins by talking about a missionary to India. In the early 1900s, who began to wrestle with a very profound question. And that is, at what point do the new converts or the people that we're working with, at what point do they become a Christian? Where's the line where they cross from being a pagan to a Christian? Now you need to understand why he's asking the question, because many of you grew up and you had a very simple, I know exactly when, and you knew where the line was drawn. But he began to say things like this. If they've been baptized, but they still have a Hindu shrine in their home, are they a Christian? If they haven't been baptized, but they've gotten rid of all of their pagan worship styles and they're hanging out with everybody at the church and doing everything that we're doing and participating in all of our work, are they a Christian? And he began to wrestle with, how do we figure this out? That question and that wrestling he developed an entire theory, because back in those days, missionaries had to be educated. So this missionary, who had a high level of education, began to work in mathematical number set theory. Now, I want to tell you that Ron Johns decided he was going to dive into number set theory so he could understand. And I looked up the Wikipedia article, and I couldn't even make it through the Wikipedia article. I do not understand number set theory. It confuses me.
Ask your wife.
Yes, no. Okay, so that guy wrote a book, and he talked about church membership as a number set theory concept. So the guy whose book I read took that book and dumbed it down for people like me. Well, not quite. I'm going to give you what is actually dumbed down enough for me. Okay, give me the next slide. Basically, the guy came up with 3 ways to think about church membership. Who's in and who's out of a church. He came up with 3 ways. He had names for them that corresponded to number set theory. I've changed all the names to protect the innocent. Me. The first one I'm going to introduce you to, and what I'd like for you to do is just hang with me till I get through all 3 of them, and then we'll back up the slides and ask questions and make comments. Is that okay? All right. The first one is called, I'm calling, you're in or out by signs and fences. If you're inside the fence, you're in. If you're outside the fence, you're out. And we hang signs on the fences to let you know what the fences mean. What determines the fences? So notice that I put here on this slide, what I've put are, I've just given 4 examples. Okay? So you could have baptism as a sign on the fence. Right? You're not in until you've been baptized. Or, if you grew up Church of Christ, the method of baptism is even more important than just baptism. Like, it has to be the right kind of baptism. Everybody with me? All right. Worship style. Maybe you're in church, in this church, only if you like all the old traditional hymns and you don't mess around with any of that 7-Eleven hymns, right? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Seven words and you sing them 11 times. Okay. Or maybe it's exactly the opposite. If you sing in those old hymns, you're boring me. Can't stand those. Don't want to be part of that church. Gender roles, right? And go either way. We're going to hang a sign based on what our fence is. theological priorities. You know, these things are more important than those things. Let me give you an example from the book. He interviews and talks a lot in the book with a Mennonite pastor. How important is it to be a pacifist? That's a theological priority for the Mennonites. Now see, that gets us outside of our Church of Christ head, right?
Can you say that?
Yeah,
Be a
what's
what?
Pacifist, sorry.
Oh,
I took a Claritin this morning and my whole body is drying up. I'm going to just blow away in just a minute. Yeah, so that's a theological priority, pacifism. And so if you aren't anti-war or military, then you can't be part of the church. Or the opposite. We could be the opposite, right? If you're not for, right? If you don't have a picture of Jesus holding an AK-47 up, you're not part of us. Okay? Now, conformity to the clear boundaries determines who's in or out, but I want you to notice that the way I drew the fence is with barbed wire. Because it's not about the fence. It's about the way we treat people with the fence. It's about this posture of protection. It's about fear. It's about exclusivity. Making sure we don't let the wrong people in. And definitely we try hard not to let the right people out. But all of us have been part of churches like this. And it was really hard to keep the teenagers in, wasn't it? Teenagers? So that's this, I'm calling it in or out by signs and fences. Okay? That's what I'm calling it. Next slide. Second one. Let me see how to pick. Can you see the blue in the center? That's kind of bright. So what's missing from the picture here? No fence. We still have signs, right? This is a judgment-free atmosphere. This is positive, practical preaching that everybody goes away with something. This is reasonable expectations of people. We expect you to show up a couple of times a month and maybe, make a contribution but we're not going to get unreasonable about it. The demands on you are not going to be too high lest you decide to leave. Diverse beliefs are tolerated. Now, some people in the room are already saying, this feels a whole lot like Oak Ridge. You are in or out by choice. And it's by personal choice. In this way of forming a church or deciding church membership, individuals decide for themselves whether they're in or out. Now, what's the problem with this? The problem that immediately should jump out at you is people are going to come and go a lot in this kind of scenario. This idea is that we have just kind of all gathered together. Now, in the book, which, by the way, I haven't said the title of the book. It's Centered Set Church. That's the title of the book. And the last thing we'll talk about here is a centered set, but I've changed the name. But let's use an example from the book about these first two. Okay? So let's say, where's Taylor? Where'd you go? There you go. So let's say Taylor says, hey, everybody, we've got a beautiful Sunday afternoon. Let's get a gang together. We're going to go down to the Alito football stadium and we're going to play a pickup game of soccer. And I've got the ball and everything we need and we're going to have a great time. And so we all go down there and we're going to join the soccer game. Are you with me? Okay. So we all go down there. If we were a by signs and fences soccer game, we would be very hard on, if you can't kick the ball without falling down, you're not part of the game. Yes? If you don't know the rules already, we're not explaining the rules. If you can't play by the rules, you don't know the rules, we're not explaining. This would be a signs and fences soccer game. Okay? And we might be pretty harsh about sending some people away or not letting them play, right? Here, how about you go get water for us, right? And that kind of a thing. If we were the in by choice, out by choice kind of an organization, we might have soccer going on in the middle of the field and a little kickball over in the corner over here. And there might be some people laying out and getting a suntan. Well, probably not today, but over there. And it would look more like a city park than it looked like a soccer game. Are you with me? And so that's a different differentiation between the two. Next one. I'm calling this one by what we have on our website. This is in the book. It's called Centered Set. And the idea is that people are part of the group if their lives are centered, are focused on, are directed towards becoming like Jesus. This is how you decide who's in the group. Now notice something. And this is a change. My illustrations are, first of all, they're way better than the graphics in the book because Canva is magical. And Canva didn't exist when the book was written. Notice that there's still a boundary in this. You can barely see it, but there's still a boundary. Because things that the scriptures call for do matter. Right? If you're going to be a Jesus follower, you're not going to be shooting up football parades. There are things that you're not going to do. And so there are some definitions to what it means to be a Jesus follower. Jesus is pretty clear in the Sermon on the Mount about what he has expectations-wise of us. But the focus is not on who do we keep in or out based on those boundaries. They exist. Who's in or out depends on who is making a move towards becoming like Jesus. So in this scenario, somebody might be outside the fence and still be counted a part of that fellowship because they're making a move towards Jesus. And at the same time, and this is the part that really got me excited, is the realization that there are lots of people inside the fence who keep all the rules, but their hearts are not turned towards Jesus. And this model explains why that can be. That might exist. Okay. There are other things you might notice about the picture. Let me open it up for questions. So Taylor and Trent, get ready. Yeah, Carol Pyle's ready. These are 3 ways of thinking about it. And I may put off some of your questions till a future class, but we'll get back to it. Carol Pyle.
What are the colored arrows for?
It's a great question. Anybody want to take a guess? The colors are orange, yellow, and red. First of all, I did not do blue and red because it's an election cycle year. So, I originally had purple, blue, and red. And then I changed it. Why are they orange, red, and yellow?
Might be the different strengths of their direction.
Okay.
Get that?
Yeah, no, go ahead and say it again in the mic.
Might be the different strength of their direction.
Okay. Anybody else?
Well, it looks like the yellow is pointed inward, the red is pointed outward, and the orange is stagnant or parallel.
Yeah, so what I'm trying to indicate, and it's Ron's weird brain, strength is a great way to say it. but you, Trent, you're getting there. Yellow is definitely directed towards becoming like Jesus. Red is definitely directed away from Jesus. Orange is turning. Somebody who's in the process of turning towards Jesus. Right? That's what I'm doing there. I'm going from red to orange or from yellow to red. Right? It could go either way. All right? Comments? Questions? Anybody have questions on the previous slides? Brad?
Okay, so it isn't this whole bit. The problem with the whole bit, as I see it, is that's what we're concerned about: who's in and who's out. Right? But I don't care which of the three you look at. What we want to do in our brains is we want to figure out who's in and who's out. So you have this first one, which we go, we don't like that. And we have that second one, we go, I don't like that either. So let's come up with another one that makes us feel good. And the whole point is we're still trying to find a way to figure out who's in and who's out rather than leaving it up to God. So I'm not destroying the whole premise because you got to have some boundary, if you will, right? Whether it's a personal relationship or there's got to be boundaries. So I understand that. But I think we're preoccupied with who's in and who's out all the time. And I'm not sure that's a good attitude to even start with.
That's exactly what I hope you guys are starting to think. That's exactly where I want you to go. Because that is the point of the centered set is, sure, there's a set. Yes, Jesus tells a sheep and goats parable. Yes? Hello?
Yes.
Matthew 25. There is a set. The point is, we don't determine it. Jesus does. Now, it's not that we don't know where the boundary is. We do know. It's not that we don't know what direction our heart is going. We do know. The point of a centered set church is to not discuss membership, but rather to discuss movement towards becoming like Jesus. It's to discuss discipleship. And so, you're absolutely right. He spends a lot of time in the book saying, in the first set, in which, by the way, yes, you're right, Brad, we go on the first set. Most of us left churches like that and came to Oak Ridge because we felt like it wasn't that. And we don't like it. But there's a whole lot more Christians in America who love that. They want to know exactly what the rules are. Just tell me, leave me alone, I'll do it. I'll hide the ones I don't want to do and won't talk about them at church, but I'll follow all the rules. Just give me the rules and let me know who's in, who's out. And I grew up that way. I don't know about you, but I grew up arguing with my Methodist friends at school about why they were going to hell for having dances on Sunday night youth group. You can't do that. And because I knew what the boundaries were. But what he says in the book is both of the first set, the in or out by signs and fences, the in by choice, out by choice group, both of those are focused on the boundary. Center set recognizes there is a boundary but stops focusing on it. That's the point. Believe, belong, believe, behave is to stop focusing on the boundary. Are you with me? Okay, I'm just answering questions right now. There's a lot of implications to this. Go ahead.
I really like the way Brad said it better than the way you just said. You said focus on the boundary. We're not preoccupied with who's in and who's out. That really resonated with me whenever Brad said that. And it's not that we're not preoccupied with the boundaries, because there are things that we need to be paying attention to. But we are often too preoccupied with who's in and who's out. And that's, to me, that feels like a good way to think about this.
Again, and I appreciate what you're saying. The idea here is who is moving towards becoming more like Jesus. And I just got to tell you, Holly Hutto is sending me prayer requests because she believes God cares about her aging mother with Alzheimer's. And even though her life circumstances are preventing her from plugging into a church right now, she trusts that somebody cares enough to talk to God for her. I have no idea what her life circumstances are, exactly what's going on. I don't need to decide whether she's in or out of our group. What I know is her heart is turned towards God. And that matters. I may meet people who don't even believe in God. Stay with me. But they are so much more interested in being like Jesus than they are in being like other people in the world that they are probably a yellow or orange arrow. And I need to recognize not where they are in position with the boundary, but where they are in direction of their life. I need to interact with them on that basis. That's what we're looking for here. I'm going to go back to Stephen, and then if you'd come up here to Beth Hall. Stephen.
Well, it is written, to the one who knows what is right to do and does not do it, to him it is sin. But it also implies that it is our duty to find out, is to approach Christ so we can learn what is right to do. If we don't bother trying to learn what is right to do, we're not heading towards it.
That's absolutely true. And over the next couple of weeks, I want us to deal with a lot of scripture with this. But that's absolutely true. However, we also have a tendency to want to make really long lists of what are right to do and wrong to do that are not based on discipleship, but based on our interpretation of Scripture. And that can be
It's a personal.
Absolutely.
It's a personal journey. We're not supposed to be cat herders.
It is a personal journey. Absolutely, it's a personal journey. We are going to be judged individually, absolutely. But I cannot overemphasize this. The main reason I want to discuss this, the main reason I was motivated to bring this class is because it is not an individual journey. We are in a communal journey. And being part of a group of people that are all moving to becoming more like Jesus is the only way we will become more like Jesus. We cannot do it individually. And that's very, very, very important. All right, Bev.
As someone who was raised in a little box boundary church, the reason I focused on those issues is because I was scared for my friends. I love my friends, and I was worried about them, and thought I needed to enlighten them and all that. It's a terrible way to be. I can testify.
To live in that fear.
Yes.
So much so that we might have looked at some of our friends in fear they were going to be eternally damned when they were actually more like Jesus than we were. And that's very significant. I know this is not easy, and I know some of us are really going to wrestle with this. I'm not asking you to accept everything carte blanche. Totally not. But I have been looking for what makes Oak Ridge unique. And as I began to wrestle through these, the in and out by choice model really bothered me to think of Oak Ridge that way. It really bothered me. And I know that we've had a tendency, I mean, in the second lesson last week, you got a document that says how you are officially a member at Oak Ridge, right? And as we had that conversation, our leadership said, why do we even have to identify this? You know, why? Why do we have to identify who's a, quote, official voting member of Oak Ridge, right? And this has to do with unholy marriage of church and state. Is what that has to do with. But that's a difficult situation that we had to determine that. Now, that being the case, however, that doesn't have to determine how we treat each other, and we chose a model that allowed for us to be more about discipleship than focusing on the boundary of who's in and out. That's how we wrote that letter. And so when I saw this, I rejoiced because somebody put words to what I have experienced at Oak Ridge. It was a clear explanation to me of what makes us unique. Go ahead.
I want to talk about the conversation between you and me and Tammy last Sunday.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, you guys all know that guy showed up last Sunday and was in the church with me. And then afterwards, me and Tammy and Ron talked about, because I was scared to death, you guys. I was afraid that that guy was going to act up and all that stuff because he had been drinking and all that stuff. And I was scared to death of it. I was like, well, and I was worried about how all of you would accept this guy coming here because he really needed to be here with us. He slept through half of it and he kept cursing, and I was calming him down to keep that from happening because I didn't want to offend all of you. But then after we talked, me and Ron talked about it, and it kind of made me think, what kind of church are we? Are we the kind of church that will let a drunken guy that may come in here and cuss a little bit, or, and are we that kind of church? And I feel like we are. I think we are. To be honest with you, I was less like that, like you guys are, and I came to realize because I was worried about you guys, how you all would react to it when I was really worried about, I guess how I would react to it. And he came in here and you guys loved on him. Everybody came and said hello, and it was really nice. But speak on it. What do you think?
Well, end with telling them, keep the mic, end with telling them about the text you got that night.
About him feeling better, but he came, he sent me a text that night, and he said that there was a real calmness. He felt a real calm. So, of course, he's not here with us today, and I tried to get him to come go with us, but, I'm going to keep working on him, and, that was truly my concern. I didn't, because he was over cussing. I was like, hey, dude, you got to clean that up, because I didn't want him to offend all of you. But I was wondering how much of it are we willing to take from this? Man, we got to open the doors to folks like that.
Bunny, I'm going to let you have the last word. I've got 3 minutes left, but I want to do the last slide before we leave. So this is what's on our website. Nathan Hull wrote this. We had something similar on the previous website, and I didn't like it. I was frustrated with it. And Nathan said, let me rewrite it. And I said, go for it. And he wrote it, and we were all like, yes, that's exactly it. Come as you are, we welcome you, no strings attached. Cultural, religious, and economic barriers can make it difficult to find a home. The love of Christ removes those barriers. Through him, we strive to make Oak Ridge a home where everyone belongs. So we start with belonging. You don't have to believe and you don't have to behave in a particular way to belong. If you come in and you aren't socially adept to our way of doing things, you still belong. Then we hope you believe. Do you have doubts? Are you experiencing a crisis of faith? Join the club. Jesus' closest followers doubted and even deserted him. We take refuge in Jesus' faithfulness when our own fails. What a line! We lean into the doubt as we lean on each other. This is not an independent journey. Become. We want to experience our faith in practical ways. We want to grow in community with a loving Creator. We want to let go of attitudes and actions that hurt us or others. See, there are boundaries. There's still boundaries. Bible study, authentic relationships, following Jesus, these things lead us to maturity. And so I'm not saying everybody has to come in this order. I'm not saying there aren't people who walk in the door already believing and then begin to belong. And it's not a rigid path, but it's a recognition that whereas if you're in this in or out by fences and signs, then it's a behave the right way first, believe, Maybe we'd let you believe first and then behave, but you're not going to belong until you can behave as we do. And that can't work in Jesus' model. And that's where we'll go next week, is looking at Jesus' model. All right, you get to close us out, Lonnie.
All this is great. Recently I read a quote from the Reformed theologian J. Gresham, Mention or Make It, who was active in the early 20th century, right? He dealt with theological liberalism when it came to Princeton and all that stuff, because there was a big change. But he essentially, I imagine, I don't know what the timeline is with the center set theory, but I would imagine, apart from that, had made the conclusion that we don't know what the amount of knowledge someone needs in order to be saved. Right. So we ought to be tentative. Right. However, well, that's one thing, right? In terms of doctrine, of course. But when it comes to belonging, I suppose, now it sounds good, right? But in 1 Corinthians, when goes to that, Paul explicitly, when talking about the man who, when talking about or admonishing the church, Corinth, who's led a man who's committing sexual immorality with stepmothers, right? He tells them to not even eat with someone like that, and it also goes on to say that, slander and idolatry, right? So my question is clearly that's Paul drawing a line right there and saying, don't, right? That person can't even belong, right? Because they're not behaving in a certain way. So how would we go about that?
2 classes from now. We're coming back to Paul in the New Testament writers. Next week I want to deal with Jesus, and then I want to do the early church, and I want to come back to that. But that's exactly where I want to go. I mean, I want to deal with 1st and 2nd Corinthians and that man. I want that to be part of our conversation. So 2 classes from now, you have to keep coming back. I'm sorry. It's a legitimate question, and because I knew that question was going to come, is one of the reasons that I made sure in the book and in the sermon videos that I watched, and I can give you references to all that if y'all want it. The centered set theory does not have a boundary drawn in it. I've added the boundary drawn in. But in the book, he discusses that there are boundaries. It's just that we don't focus on the boundaries. Like we focus on the belonging and the connecting people and the bringing them into belief and bringing them into discipleship. Then the boundaries get taken care of. When we're focused on true discipleship, the boundaries take care of themselves. That's my short answer to your question, but I want to come back to that. I do in 2 weeks. Yep. Because there are some lines drawn, and we do need to worry about safety. We don't want to let people in here that are going to harm us, right? So that matters. Okay, we've gone over, and we've got kids who need to escape. So thank you very much. See you next week. Anybody mad at me that I need to avoid in the foyer? Could you wave? Okay.